Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait a minute or two to let some more people log on. All right, so it looks like we had some more people trickle in. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Accelerating Your Understanding of the CMDB. My name is Tabitha Ishman, if we haven't met or talked before, and I am the Marketing Manager of Excalibur Data Systems. And we're really excited to be working with our partner, Cherwell, our preferred ITSM solution on this webinar series. So just a few things before we get started. Mike, you can change the slide for me. So here are the few webinar logistics. The webinar is being recorded. The recording will be sent via email to everyone on the line tomorrow, and we'll answer any questions at the end in a Q&A session. But if you have any questions during the presentation, you can type them into the questions or chat window. So now I'd like to introduce Mike Fuson, VP, Senior Solution Architect and Consultant of Excalibur Data Systems, because I know he has a lot of great content for all of you today. So welcome, Mike.
Hello, everyone joining us on our CMDB journey for the first time. We had a lot of fun in our last CMDB discussion talking about what is a CMDB, why do I care, and what are the parts and pieces of the CMDB. Today, we're going to dive a little bit deeper under the covers and take the opportunity to discuss some use cases. We are going to have a couple of polls that are going to go on as we go through this webinar. In addition, we're going to be asking if some of you are doing some exciting things to also share, if you're willing to, what you may be doing that's exciting around the CMDB. We see so many customers out there that are doing really, really neat things with their CMDB or processes that wrap around the CMDB. It's always great to have that collaboration and sharing of the wonderful things that you are doing. So we left off, well, we last left our intrepid travelers heading down the road of the CMDB. We figured out, what is a CMDB? What am I going to do with it? Do I really need one? What are the parts and pieces of it? And what are some of the basic things that it allows me to do? So we have a CMDB, because everybody has a CMDB. Everybody, or at least everybody should have a CMDB. So what now? I've got this CMDB, I've got this thing, and it's got all of these CIs in it, which have a whole bunch of data. What am I going to do with it? Well, one of the first questions that you have to ask yourself is, have we developed some processes and procedures to help manage our CMDB? As with everything else in life, and especially in IT, if we don't have processes and procedures to identify how we're going to do it, what we're going to do, and who's responsible for it, it makes it very, very difficult for us to effectively manage something. Now, when you start to think about the CMDB, this is a pretty big thing that also has a lot of moving parts and has different types of assets in it. Some of the CI types that we talked about the last time were the basic things like computers and servers and network devices. But we talked about other things people are using in their CMDB. We have a customer that we're working with right now that is actually going to put conference rooms in their CMDB. After a lot of discussion, where was the best place to track these things? and how are they using them, it made sense for them to put them into the CMDB. Now, it could be IP addresses. It could be things like the power devices that may sit in your data center or in your racks. It could be racks themselves. It could be blade servers or the blades that go into blade servers. All sorts of different things you may be tracking. One of our friends that's on the call with us, they track applications in a fairly meaningful way. And I'm hoping he may share a little bit about how they're doing that, some of the great things that they're doing that are extremely proactive when we get to that point in the discussion. But one of the things that we need to look at is we have all of these things. Well, generally speaking, there's not one individual that's responsible for all of these things. Usually is spread out amongst teams. You may have what we referred to last time as a CMDB Grand Poobah. For those of you that are old enough, I'm referring to Howard Cunningham Grand Poobah, not Fred Flintstone Grand Poobah. But you've got a person that's taking that leadership role with your CMDB to make sure that processes and procedures are being followed. They're helping to shepherd that overall process. Think about in terms of our other ITIL-based processes, folks that are an incident manager or a change manager, same sort of concept. But your CMDB CIs themselves, the CI types, may be spread across multiple groups, because for many organizations, they have a team that are the server team, and then they have a team who's the desktop team, and they have a team who's the network team. Very, very common to see that sort of delineation, and they may be each as their own teams or groups responsible for the CIs that fall within their control. But we get these processes and procedures put together. One of the most critical things is we need to communicate them. So many times what we do when we work with customers on developing their CMDB process is to get the various stakeholders together and agree on processes and procedures. Get the approvals, get everybody signed off. Everybody agrees this is how we're going to do things. And at that point, then when we share these processes and procedures, that whole communications thing that we all tend to think of as an afterthought, we're communicating those processes and procedures out, at which point it gives us a little bit of teeth in which to manage our CMDB. Everybody should be aware of the processes and procedures. There shouldn't be a lot of confusion. And if there is, then we simply refer back to, here's our process and procedure plan for this. And like anything else, that's a living, breathing document that we're going to adjust as we continue to evolve our own internal processes, but also things that relate to our CMDB as we introduce new CI types, or we introduce new processes or things, as I'm describing in my next bullet point, which is, do we have checks and balances in place to try and prevent the CMDB from being overrun by weeds? Remember, it's like a garden. We need to tend it. I like to refer to the CMDB as a garden because it is something that is definitely ever changing, ever evolving, and moving. And so we need to be able to tend to that garden, and these processes and procedures are going to help us do that. And do we have the ability to know that things are being tended? And if they're not, be able to come back and kind of turn the screws a little bit, light a little fire, and say, hey guys, we need you to go in and make sure that this stuff is still up to date. And we have clients that are on the line that do that in multiple ways, whether that is audit processes, it could be checking against a discovery tool, and they're looking to make sure that things have been deprecated in the CMDB. So if the discovery tool is no longer discovering them and they know they've retired them. Couple of different examples as to how we might be able to do some of those things that we want to do. Is someone on the team responsible for it? You want to have in that process and procedure manual, when do we update a CI? What are our rules? Who can update the CI and what can they update? You get into a whole discussion if you're pulling data in from other sources, whether that be a discovery tool or that be a database. Well, we had a couple of folks that when we talked last time that talked about different teams may be managing things in SharePoint, or maybe managing some of their data in a database that they've built, and they want to feed the CMDB, but they still want to do some of their more intricate management. Maybe they've built some automations for things that they do in their little tool that they've built, but they want to feed that data to the CMDB. They don't want to have to import and export and do things in a manual fashion. Well, how are we going to do that? So maybe we're importing from SCCM, or we're importing from Cherwell Asset Management. If we're importing that data, we probably want to put some locks on some fields. Those are fields that people shouldn't be changing as they're interacting with the CMDB. Why shouldn't they be changing them? Well, this is data coming in from what I'll refer to as a gold source. And that data is just going to simply be overwritten if they change it by the next pull of that data into our CMDB. But there could be other fields and other values that they're not manually filling in, or excuse me, that are not being automatically filled in, but that they may be manually populating. And that could take numerous forms. That could be warranty expiration dates, or things like financial data on that CI, or alternative IP addresses that maybe have to be set against that CI. And so that gives us the ability to have some things locked down, and then who can update. So is that certain individuals? Is that the team that owns the CI? Different rules apply to different organizations, but you need to kind of have what are our rules around this. And keep in mind, the rules could vary by CI type. So you might have a different set of rules for desktops and laptops than you may have for servers, and that's okay. And if you're using a powerful platform like Cherwell Service Management, you have the ability to really slice and dice how each one of the CIs is going to be interacted with. When we look at our checks and balances, do we do alerts if someone changes something on a CI? So if someone changes something on a CI, do we want to do an alert? Perhaps we're running a little bit more loose, and we allow various people to be able to change CIs. It's not as locked down. But maybe if a CI is changed and it's not a member of the team that owns it, it notifies the team that somebody's made a change to the CI. Those are all things that we need to consider, we need to talk through and determine what are those processes and procedures going to be, what are the controls that we're going to put in place, and how exactly do we want to control things. Then we start to look at the different things that we may be doing with our CMDB. So we get asked this question even after I've had conversations to this level with customers. Do I really need a CMDB? Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. It can really, for many customers, be the center of the universe, or really help them as they start to drive other process areas and drive overall maturity and improvement. What are the sort of things that I can do to be proactive? So one of the examples, and I alluded to this in our last webinar, was if an asset hasn't checked in a while, this is typically laptops, desktops, servers, perhaps more if you're using a discovery tool. And for example, flag an asset as missing if it hasn't checked in 60 or 90 days. This could create an email alert and or appear even on a dashboard. When working with a lot of customers that have compliance requirements, if a laptop seems to be missing, they may have a fiduciary responsibility to file a police report. And if they don't do that, they could be subject potentially to fines. Kind of be a good idea if we know something isn't out there, or we haven't seen it for a while, let's track it down. I know probably none of you that are on the phone have ever had this happen, but I've seen it, in my couple of decades in working in the ITSM space, that an employee loses a laptop, or it gets stolen out of their car, or what have you. The Tooth Fairy comes and takes it, and they kind of fail to tell anybody. May never happen to you guys. I've seen it. Maybe it's a weird circumstance. And so you have a situation now of a laptop that's now gone missing. An example I use, one of our team members from Excalibur was out visiting a customer, and they went out to lunch or dinner, and when he parked in the parking lot, his car was broken into, and his Microsoft Surface happened to be stolen in that process, as well as his CPAP machine that was in his trunk, which is kind of odd. But they took everything that wasn't nailed down and ran off with it. And as soon as that was discovered, he alerted our team saying, hey, my laptop's gone missing. We put a flag on it to make sure, okay, we put it in, so it's protected. If it tried to connect to our network, it's not gonna be able to get anywhere. But we also needed to monitor for it. We had a couple of monitoring tools to see if it would come online. And if it came online, could we grab a picture of who might be using it, because we could remote control it. But it never did come back online. Don't know what happened to it. It just kind of disappeared. But we were able to file a police report and make sure that things were taken care of. Fortunately, the hard drive was encrypted, and we had done all the other things that we needed to do. But if it had ever come back online, it would have remote wiped that drive almost immediately as soon as we hit the button. And so it is one of those things where, could there be customer data on there? Could there be things that we don't want to have that may require a notification? From a fiduciary responsibility perspective, we may have to notify bodies that provide our certifications or provide our guidance, or in an audit, be able to demonstrate that we know where everything is and we have processes and procedures in place to handle if something does go missing, and we're going to know it's missing before a year later. And so these are important things to look at, and these are things that we can do to be proactive rather than reactive, because the device hasn't been seen for a while and we check it. Now, you could have an exception process for those devices, and then you have to ask yourself, do those exceptions now require an approval? And of course, if we're using a powerful platform like Cherwell, we do have the ability to create approval processes around granting an exception. And then we can do things like the introduction of event management. So have events mark a device as down or even degraded and send an alert. So we have the ability to actually consume events in from an event management system, or have those sent as emails or what have you. We'll call it a quote unquote integration to our event management platform. And that could be taking automatic actions against our CIs that are in the system. If we have relationships that are then built between the CIs, we could walk the downstream relationship, and based on various rules that we put in place, possibly mark a device as degraded, because maybe you've got two web servers, and we've lost one of the web servers. Okay, then this particular application may be degraded because we've lost part of our load balance. It's a matter of leveraging the tools that we have to be able to look at what are we doing, and we can set this stuff up to be, I like to use the term automatically, to be able to walk through these relationships, or just as simple as mark a device is down because we've been alerted by the monitoring software that that device is now offline. And send out alerts then in Cherwell. And you may have a network. I think of a couple of our clients that are on the line have network operations centers, and these folks that are in the network operations center may see that immediately. But other people that may have application responsibility, or it could potentially impact their application, they're aware of it. So if all of a sudden we start getting incidents into the service desk, we may know what's going on. We may already have proactively spun up a problem to begin an investigative process of why did this go down. And so there's now something, or a major incident, something that the service desk members can tag to. Oh, hey, we already know that XYZ application is going to be running not as smoothly as it normally does because we've lost one or two of our web servers for that. One of the other things we can do to be proactive is looking at creating those relationships to do things like this between the CIs. That can either be done manually, or we can leverage a tool to create those relationships. So a dependency mapping tool that looks for the dependencies between various devices. We could also have an audit process that ensures that our CIs are being reviewed and staying up to date. There's nothing worse than a stale CMDB. And it can be stale in a couple of fashions. One, we're not tending to it at all, or we have devices in there that have been retired, but because a process wasn't followed, those devices are still showing as active devices that we have to manage. And so, could we go through and have an active process of being sure that those devices are reviewed? Are they still active? Are they being reviewed? Are they in the right status? And somebody's actively managing those things. That could be especially important when it comes to servers. We've seen it for some of our more mature customers, especially around network devices, because those things can be changed pretty quickly. Something seems to not be working and they just swap it out with another one. Well, what the heck is in that closet? Which device is in that closet? Did the location of that device get updated? Do we know what's where? So if we receive an alert, for example, on that device, we actually know where that device is. But that requires that we do things in order to maintain a level of proactivity. So this is our first poll that we're going to do. So what are you doing that is proactive with your CMDB? Are you doing anything that is proactive with your CMDB? I did put a couple funny choices in there for my more sarcastic folks that are out there. So it looks like many, about 30% of you are actually doing things that are proactive. Would anybody be willing to share? Would anybody be willing to share what they're doing that's proactive within their CMDB? You can just raise your hand and Tabitha will unmute you so you can share with the group. The little hand thing is what, at the bottom of the screen, Tabitha?
Yes, it should be for them, or on the side. I'm not seeing any hand raises, Mike. Oh, here we go. David, I unmuted you.
Sure. Yeah, we're using Netcool as an event repository, so it doesn't matter if it's going through Splunk, TeamQuest, VRops, Wiley, ITCAM, or whatever the product is. It rolls up into there, and we make calls to the CMDB, and we use not just the full name. We use a node alias, which would be the IP. That was the source, if you can't get the host name or the node name. And we also use a thing we call cost code, which is a 3-character attribute that we use to identify a higher level in the CMDB. So it'd be like maybe the application or the budgetary area owning the box. And it can be used to identify, like say you have a Windows or a Linux server, we use that cost code to help us identify who the application area is, that if there's an issue higher than the OS, like a website's not running, their data drive's running out of space, stuff like that.
Yeah, and interesting, David, you bring up like that the data drive is out of space, because we've seen that in situations where maybe the database is doing an update and the database, the log file runs out of space, and little things like that happen that affect the way the application is going to run. That's very, very cool. Thank you for sharing. I see Franny also raised her hand here.
Yeah, I'm going to unmute her. So Franny,
Hi,
you can
Franny.
go ahead.
Hey, Mike, how you doing? How's everyone doing?
We're doing great.
We just within the last few weeks have gotten pretty proactive on getting our CMDB cleaned up. It's that whole care and feeding that you mentioned. We've got what we're calling a team of CMDB sheriffs. It's me and 3 other managers, and we're kind of owning the CMDB and looking at what's in the data and trying to get some cohesiveness there, have pushed it out to the team. So we're cleaning up our systems, making a lot of progress with that, cleaning up our links. We've also created a CMD health dashboard showing where there could be items that need to be cleaned up. Like one of the things we want a description on all of our, on the appropriate CIs and, things that are missing. So we're trying to be proactive on keeping that data current and accurate so that, when people do use it to interface, to other systems like titration, we're all seeing the same thing. So, but that's been a fairly intensive trying to get everybody on the same board, but that's why we kind of formed this group of 4 that, and we've got them covering our operations side, our development side, our business services, and our security side, so that we've got representation from all. And then we, of course, trickle down, and there's CI coordinators for every department. So
Now,
just something we're doing to help it keep it clean.
You called yourself CI sheriffs. I have
Yeah.
to know, because I could see you doing this. Did you get little badges made for everybody?
We're going to, because one of the sheriffs is Cindy DeChamp, and you know Cindy. So yeah, we're going to get we want to find some little badges and, little vests with tassels or something. I don't know.
Hey, see, you make it fun, but at the same time,
Exactly.
it lets everybody know, hey, look, we're while we're having fun with this, we are kind of taking this seriously. This is an important thing for us to move forward. That is fantastic. That is very cool to hear. I'm very excited for you guys. Thank you for sharing. Now, Tabitha, looks like we have one more. Alina has raised her hand as well.
Okay. Here we go. I unmuted you.
Hi, hello, Lina Latisheva here. And well, I really liked your CI sheriffs. I love this idea. We definitely need more sheriffs in our CMDB environment, it's for sure. Thank you for sharing that. But in our organization, we use a couple proactive actions from what you mentioned here. One of them, we do run reconciliation reports and look at the last login information, which is compared for end user devices. It's compared for primary user versus the last login user, and also when it was last checked on network. So we will go after computers which didn't check on the network for a little while. Usually it's like a 90 days rule. We use both SCCM and CAM to help with these reconciliations. Also, we do utilize something like a loaner notifications. We set up a loaner status on our computers, and when it's due for return, we receive an email about this equipment coming back. And we currently actively working on CMDB audit, which is a huge task, but we really expect to see a great result out of that with bringing data more up to date.
Well, and that's a fantastic use case example, Lena, is loaner laptops, right? Because those are things that you have an expectation. Now, they could extend the loan, right? And there could be a process for that. But
yes.
Hey, we're expecting to get this thing back. What happened to it? And I had kind of used it as used something similar as a use case on our last call, where one of our clients that has a very robust process like you do on, if we haven't heard from it in a while, what they found is that was typically laptops that were issued to consultants, because as a consultant I had to have a laptop so I could connect to their network, and I would return the laptop at the completion of my consulting assignment, but the manager hadn't gotten around to following the procedure to get the laptop back where it needed to go. And they would have 2 or 3 piled up on a table in their office, and that's where the missing laptops were. So they were able to go, oh, well, this was a consultant laptop that was given to Mike, and his manager was Lena, so it would have been returned to Lena. Hey, Lena, where's Mike's laptop? Oh, he shipped it in and it's still sitting in the box. I didn't even open it.
Right.
Great, and then we can check it in, and we've accounted now for all of our devices. Nothing's gone, AWOL on us. We can track it down, and then it lets us then know we may only have a few devices that are questionable, and are they showing up on the network? And if so, based on what IP they're coming in with, we might know what facility they're in, and we can start tracking down those ones that are missing. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing.
And also, I probably could mention we have a couple reports showing on our dashboard. One is for terminated primary users. So if, and this is connected to our user a table. So when status of the user changes from active to disabled, and if they still have a primary computer marked for them, they will show up on that report. And another one for auto discovered computers and servers. You mentioned that, and we currently try to use that auto discovery tool. So if it doesn't find a device in our CMDB, it will put on this report, and somebody reviews that report on the regular basis to follow up and properly add these devices to CMDB.
Excellent. Excellent. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. So for those of you that raised your hand, if you click on the hand again, it'll put your hand down because we're going to have another poll coming up here shortly. So everybody, should be able to see a screen that now says, what does the CMDB do for our ITSM processes? Is that what we're, actually, I could probably check to make sure that we're seeing
Yeah, that's
the
what we're
right
seeing, Mike.
screen. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Tabitha. So, so what does the CMDB do for our ITSM processes? We have all of these robust ITSM processes that we're already running. So we have the ability to link CIs to incidents. We took a look at that the last time. We have the ability to link CIs to changes, and that helps us know what CIs are part of and affected by the change. That helps us identify possible conflicts of other changes going against the CI, the same CIs, from a timing perspective. So that we have two different groups that might have a responsibility, maybe an applications group and the server team. Server team's doing Windows updates, and the application group wants to do an application update or do something with the database or what have you, and they need to be on the server to do that. So that helps us try to avoid those conflicts. The example I used as an electrician, when they're working on something and they turn the power off to it, they will put what's called a lockout tag on the breaker box or on the switch that turns that thing on to say, hey, don't touch this, somebody's working on it. And kind of the same concept here. This helps us identify those things so that we aren't potentially doing two conflicting changes at the same time. Also within the CMDB, and this is again leveraging some of the power that our Cherwell platform would bring for us, is if we have defined allowable change times on our CIs, and there are those scheduled outages that come out of the box, and everybody says, what do I do with these on my server CIs? What are these? Because maybe that hasn't been defined yet. Again, going back to process and procedures, do we have certain critical CIs that should only be set into being able to be worked on or being able to be affected by a change during a certain schedule? Now, if we've got that schedule identified for that CI and that CI is then attached to the change, all of a sudden the change goes, oh, wait a minute, I've got a CI that's not allowed to be worked on in the time frame that you've set. So do we want to do this as an emergency change, or how do we want to handle this? And that's going to be based on your processes and procedures that you've set. Maybe that requires an additional approval, and it can still be a normal change. Maybe it has to become an emergency change, so it has higher visibility that we're going to work on a particular system or application or what have you that is typically only allowed to be done on a weekend schedule, and we need to do it on a Thursday night. How do we make sure that those things don't happen? And there could be many other ways that we may leverage the power of what we can have against our CIs and our CI data as it relates to changes. It's one of the areas where we can get caught so quickly and go so rapidly down a rabbit hole, and all of a sudden we're now not meeting our change window. And for those of you that I've worked with, you've all heard my change management speech. I'm a big believer in a post-implementation review, where if we did not complete the change inside of the window that we had scheduled the change for, the change is a failed change. And that should be then reviewed by the CAB. And why did this fail? Well, it just maybe it took a little longer for the reboot to happen. I think about some of the servers when you reboot them and they sound like a plane taking off. They can take minutes before they start to boot all the way back up. Maybe we didn't account for enough time. It gives us an opportunity to have a learning experience and know that change, that when we do that to that particular server or we do it to a particular application, may take longer than we had anticipated. So let's make sure on the next time we do that type of change, we're extending our time out a little bit more. But this is the stuff that brings value and other benefit that we can derive from our CMDB. Linking CIs to problems. We know what CIs are affected by the problem. Now, that not only gives us kind of a breadth of what CIs are impacted, but we also potentially could associate then those same CIs through the power, magic, and voodoo that we can do with Cherwell to a change request without having to re-enter all of the CIs. We could actually link all of the same CIs to a change that maybe we're putting a patch out there, or something is being, we're swapping out, say, for example, a switch, and it affects a swath of devices. We know everything that was impacted, and then that gives us that historical data. So with all of this linking, you can see from a CI perspective what incident, what changes, what problems that the CI has been related to. And allows us to start to correlate data. And we can start doing searches. How many CIs have more than 5 problems that have gone against them? How many CIs have the type of searching that we can do within the platform? And we can say, wow, this CI is part of a lot of changes. Why is that? That takes us back to our proactive abilities and our ability to be proactive to understand what are the things that are getting touched a lot? What are the things that are potentially changing a lot? Does that potentially increase our risk when we're evaluating a change because this CI seems to get touched week in and week out? And why is that? Are there opportunities for our network team potentially to put something in place that gives us some redundancy? Is there, and we have a single server that's a single point of failure, is that an application or a web server or a front end that may be benefited by having multiple devices sitting behind a load balancer? It lets us investigate and evaluate that sort of information. Whether or not what we decide to do becomes a different conversation, but it gives us data. I'm a big believer in a lot of data points help us make good and sound decisions. It gives us those data points to be able to make some of those decisions quite effectively. Hopefully everyone's still awake. I see a lot of you from our little thing here tells us that you're not paying attention to this screen as much as you're paying attention to others, but everybody's checking email and doing their things, but I'm sure everybody's listening with rapt attention because everything I talk about is so exciting. So one of the questions we get asked is, would a discovery tool help us? The general answer to that is yes. Discovery tools are definitely the cat's meow. It automates a lot of things for you. So it helps to automate the population of the CIs, but that does not preclude us that certain data may be manually managed. It may discover certain things, but it can't discover absolutely everything we may be tracking against a particular CI. What about dependency mapping? So there are tools that can automate that too. Some of those tools are part of an overall package where you could buy a discovery and dependency mapping platform, or there are platforms that are that will just do the dependency mapping and be able to be tied in to the CMDB as well. A discovery and dependency mapping tool is just that. It's a tool. And it helps us keep the CMDB healthy. But we can't simply rely on that and assume, because we have a discovery and dependency mapping tool, that that's going to make everything all better. It still requires, and Lena gave a good example of, although they are pulling things in via a discovery tool, they still have processes to do some validations to ensure that things are happening. I think of my friends at Duke Realty. While things are being pulled in from SCCM, they still have a validation process to check to say, well, is SCCM reporting things we're not seeing in the CMDB, and vice versa? Are we seeing things in the CMDB that are not being reported in SCCM? Do we have any anomalies here? And then what does that mean? And they're able to take corrective action on those items. It's kind of some cool stuff that I've been able to see that they do. I didn't have any hand in building any of that. That's all Lewis and Ronnie, but they built some really, really neat things to help give them those checks and balances to ensure that the CMDB is staying clean. And it also may be a proactive element in that if all of a sudden we're finding more and more servers that are being discovered aren't pulling in, do we have a problem with our feed, as an example? That helps us also potentially identify other issues that we may need to take corrective action on. But it does allow us to keep the CMDB healthy. So how do I choose a discovery tool? This is a question we get asked all the time, because there's about 10 billion discovery tools that are out on the market. There's all kinds of different ones. And a lot of customers, because they're Microsoft shops, have SCCM. And so, hey, I've already got some tools. Do I need more tools? We have other customers that have 3 or 4 or 5 different discovery tools that are doing different things for different types of configuration items. But a discovery tool is something that is going to go out, and it's either going to be agent-based or it's going to be agentless. So SCCM as an example of an agent-based tool. CAM is an example of an agent-based tool, although there is going to be an agentless option for CAM in the not too distant future. We also have they have the ability then to crawl the network, or the ones that are using agents, the agents are calling in, phoning home, and reporting their status, their data, whatever else we're pulling from them. But the agentless tools, they're going out and actually crawling defined IP scopes that we've put in and identifying if there are devices that are on a particular IP address, and then seeing what they can discover about that device. Now they're helpful, but having the data in the CMDB is a first step on a longer journey. These discovery tools discover the data. They help to populate the CMDB, so we're not manually constantly maintaining things in the CMDB. But items can be manually tracked and managed in the CMDB. It doesn't have to be automatic. So we may have a discovery tool, take SCCM as an example, that is discovering our desktops, laptops, and our servers. And they're the Microsoft devices. It's not pulling in the Linux devices. It's not pulling in the network devices. It's not pulling in the power devices that may be out on the network. But in many cases, these other devices, so I'll take the power devices as an example, since Franny shared with us some of the things that they're doing with their CMDB. Their team there that tracked power devices, they tracked the power devices in a spreadsheet, is what they did prior to implementing Cherwell. They were over the moon excited, and now I got a database to put these things in, and I can set fields, and we can do all kinds of cool things with it, and I can track them now manually, because these are things that are not necessarily network attached, so easy to discover. But we're able to manage them, and then through processes, policies, and procedures, we're able to make sure we keep those updated. If we move a UPS from one rack to another, let's make sure we change its location within our CMDB. But it's a place to keep that data, rather than keeping it, one team keeps it in a spreadsheet over here, another team puts it in SharePoint, and another team has it scribbled on the back of a napkin that's in somebody's drawer. It lets us pull all that stuff together, and although some things may be being discovered, some things may not be discovered. And in fact, even with the discovery tool, we're going to have some management of CIs that may be manual, certain things that we want to track on those CIs. The key is having a cohesive strategy and managing it effectively, and most importantly, consistently. So as Lena shared, that was really neat to hear what they're doing at SC Johnson. What the strategy is a cohesive strategy. They're all in the same boat, or as Franny said, they've got all the sheriffs and they're all going to wear the same uniform, and we're going to do this in the same way so it's consistent and the data stays accurate. So some of the discovery tool examples that are out there on the market are there's basic discovery tools. I meant to change that in the slide and obviously missed it. Things like SCCM, Landsweeper, Bellark, Altiris, the Dell Case tool, Jamf. These are some that we've encountered with some level of frequency that integrations have been built to Cherwell, but they're fairly basic discovery tools. Then you get into some of the more advanced discovery tools like BigFix, Cherwell Asset Management, Device 42, Resolve Fixstream, Science Logic. These are ones that have integrations that exist for Cherwell, and for most of them, other than CAM, have also a dependency mapping process that could be purchased in addition to the discovery pieces to begin building out the dependency maps. Now, will we see that for CAM in the future? I haven't seen the latest roadmap for CAM, so who knows? Or maybe Cherwell buys one of these guys and all of a sudden we have dependency mapping. That's how we got CAM. But we're able to do more things with our advanced discovery tools because the basic discovery tools may only discover a certain class of device or certain types of devices that are out there. Whereas the advanced discovery tools can discover more types of devices. They're not limited to Windows desktops, laptops, and servers like SCCM is. They're able to go out there and discover network devices and printers and all sorts of things. If it's plugged into the network, they probably can talk to it and try to figure out what it is. And that starts to bring back a lot more data in that more automated fashion. Then you have things which get talked about all the time. This is where you have that conglomeration of tools that are being used to drive your CMDB journey, what we call device management tools, things like Mobile Iron or Workspace ONE, otherwise known as AirWatch, HPDM, HP WebJet, some of the SolarWinds products. They can be very specific use case. So my Mobile Iron and an AirWatch are going to be discovering the mobile devices, and that may just fill the one CI type of mobile devices and be keeping that up to date. Whereas like HP WebJet is just discovering HP WebJet printers, so that's even more limited. But for many clients that we have that have the printer items, they may have a couple of other a company that comes in that manages the rest of the printers that are out there, and they've got some sort of tool that's collecting data on those printers that we may be able to feed from. And this is certainly not an exhaustive list. These are ones we see quite commonly out in the market, but there are many, many others. And the key when you're looking at your very powerful Cherwell Service Management platform is what can we do to integrate with those tools? It might be leveraging the REST API to do our integration. We may be pulling the data from the database, say, for example, from SCCM or Landsweeper, or some combination of the two. Perhaps those devices are feeding up into a staging table that we're pulling into Cherwell. A lot of different ways to build the integration to get the data from our gold sources. So what are you guys doing with your CMDBs? So this is another poll that we're going to have out here. So are you using a discovery tool with your CMDB? So Tabitha, if you could throw that poll up there.
Got lots of answers floating in. Okay, so it looks like I'm going to close this and share it.
So it looks like a lot of you, yes, are using some sort of discovery tool to leverage and populate your CMDB. What's the next poll on discovery tools, Tabitha?
So what discovery tool are you using? And then we listed out a few, and you can check all that apply. And then if you're not using any of the bigger ones that we put, just click other. I do see a lot of others coming in, so maybe if there is another one that you're using, you can write it in the questions window, just so Mike kind of has a better idea of the products that you're using.
So as expected, a lot of folks leveraging SCCM. That's very common, what we see. Very excited to see the numbers on CAM. Very excited to see the numbers on CAM. Many of you leveraging the CAM platform. So Quest Case, yeah, Del Case I had on there. Nagios, Sean, I didn't know Nagios actually had a discovery component to it. I've seen it a lot for monitoring, but that's kind of cool that Nagios has a discovery portion to it. Zabbix. So I always wonder when we walk into a new customer, there's one I haven't heard of. About 1 out of 3 times there's something that they're using, because there's so many out there, and there are specific use cases as to how that tool was introduced into the organization. And a lot of times once you've got it up and running and punched through the firewalls and everything else, you tend to keep using that same tool. Would anyone be willing to share why they chose the discovery tool that they did? Not SCCM because we had it, but one of maybe a particular discovery tool. What was one of your decision reasons for having that tool, or choosing the tool that you did?
So David, I'm going to unmute you. Hi, David.
Hi. I didn't think I raised my hand, but at any rate,
it was still up, but it's okay. We're gonna pick on you.
We used, we do use SCCM, but we use other tools to reconcile against other feeds that are driven by the platforms. So it's like a reconciliation in a UCMDB, and then it goes to a CMDB. Right now, we're in a migration from a service manager shop to a Cherwell shop. So because we were a service manager shop, we have HP's or Micro Focus's UCMDB products.
Gotcha.
And that will change, but most potentially because we're going to Cherwell, but we already put a lot of money into it, so.
Yeah. Well, we see that with like ADDM, if you were a remedy shop,
And also integrating Flexera into some of this too, because we do that for asset management.
Yep. Flexera is a software discovery tool, software discovery and reconciliation, fairly similar to CAM. We've seen that at a number of places, and you can kind of correlate the software that may be sitting on a particular device with that device. I like it. Well, thank you for sharing, David. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks.
So, there's many reasons that, as David highlighted, hey, we had one already, and then we've got to figure out what we're going to next, if we're going to change and when we're going to change. And we've worked with customers that have, one of our large customers has ADDM, and it's been kind of interesting trying to build an integration to it, because of course, BMC built the tool for remedy and doesn't really want you to easily integrate with it. We've worked around those challenges, but one of their great challenges in replacing that tool is that they've spent years figuring out how to punch the right holes and what firewalls and in what network segments to be able to discover all of the things. And do you want to take on a new tool that now requires you to devote that time and energy to doing the same thing with a new tool? And that's going to vary from customer to customer as to whether or not that makes sense to do. So I don't really have a demo, because we, most of us here that use Cherwell know how we're doing things with it. We are going to have some future webinars coming up, and you guys will all get some notifications of those. We're going to be starting here in the not too distant future. This name may not be finalized, but we're calling it the Excalibur Roundtable Quest for Collaboration, because we have to, of course, have something that wraps around our the Excalibur and the Knights of the Round Table sort of moniker. And what we're going to be doing with that is it's going to be somewhat of an open forum that everybody's going to be welcome to join, and let's share some of the challenges you may be facing, and as a group with some of Excalibur's experts and other experts that are out there, the Cherwell experts that exist out in the ecosystem, what can we do to help you solve maybe a challenge that you're facing, and maybe you're waiting on a callback from support, or you didn't get a lot of good answers on the community site. Is that something we can help you with? So that's going to be coming. We're also going to be doing some follow-up webinars to this CMDB series, and so we have another. And so Tabitha wants me to follow us on social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. We post all of these webinars up there, but we've also added them to our resources tab on the Excalibur Data website, where you'll be able to find our upcoming webinars and the recordings for our past webinars. And if you want to be added to our email list, you can just email Tabitha, and she'll make sure you're on our email list to be notified directly of new things that are coming up. Tabitha, you want to share our last poll? So we have a poll. We want to kind of get your guys' feedback. What do you think you want to see next? Do we want to continue talking more about the CMDB? Do we want to do some discovery tool demos and examples? Maybe start to dive into event management and monitoring, or were you barely able to stay awake for this one as it was? And just so you know, we'll probably do all three. It's just how soon do we do which?
Okay, so it looks like the votes have stopped coming in, so I'm going to close that and share.
So more CMDB, more. Well, so do me a big favor, Tabitha. When you follow up with everybody, make sure they have my email address. Give me some ideas of things you'd like to see on the CMDB. I've got some ideas of some other things to dive into, but I'd like to know what you may want to know more about, and we'll get those worked into the overall webinar. Now we can open the board for questions as well. So feel free to type a question in, or raise your hand and Tabitha can unmute you if that's easier for you. And we'll try to get questions that you have answered.
Yeah, so we are going to stay on the line past 3. So if you do have to drop off, we totally understand your time constraints. But for those that want to stay on for questions, Mike's going to stay on a little bit longer to get those all answered for you.
No questions this time, Tabitha. We had like
Yeah,
100 questions last time. Maybe I did better explaining this time. I wouldn't count on it, but. Well, thank you, everyone. We do greatly appreciate you joining us. We look forward to seeing you at our next webinar or Cherwell user group meeting, or should the fates shine upon us or smile upon us, maybe we'll be able to get together at either the Clear conference here this fall, if it is an in-person thing, or at an in-person event as we start doing those again.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic day.